So good day everyone, my name is Rexel Carriaga and I'm the AR/VR coordinator of De La Salle College of St. Benilde. So before I start my talk, let me give an idea of what we are. So De La Salle College of St. Benilde is a higher educational institution, and prior to March 2020, we were ready to launch our AR/VR classes for May 2020. Alright? So everyone was excited, but we already bought 40 Oculus Rift sets and 40 high-powered PCs for a 1:1 student to PC ratio. However, on March 2020, the mid-March 2020, the major lockdown happened because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the government suspended face-to-face classes, and of course, work from home arrangements were enforced. So if you would see the idea here, of course, there was panic. The question would be, what would happen to our AR/VR classes when it's a distant online learning setup? Next, of course, how are we going to teach AR/VR development to our students in a work from home setup? And the next question we were trying to solve, or were in our minds, were how will our students be able to develop AR/VR apps when they don't have access to the school's equipment? So the question now, we already know that AR/VR apps can be used for industry training. But from a developer's perspective, or an online class perspective, how are we going to develop complex AR/VR apps when we don't have access to high-powered computers? Hence, the title of my talk is Developer's Perspective, AR/VR Content Creation Using a Low-Powered Computer. Alright, so just to give you an idea of what we're facing, let me give you now my computer system specifications and Unity's and Unreal's recommended specifications for AR/VR development. So for the operating system, I'm using Windows 8. For Unity, the recommended OS is Windows 7, Mac 10.12, and for Linux, Ubuntu 16.04 and CentOS 7. For Unreal Engine, they recommend now Windows 10. Now the problem would be in our memory. My computer is using a RAM, which is only 2 gigabytes, and then Unity's recommended specification is 8 gigabytes, and the same thing for Unreal Engine, which is the recommended memory is 8 gigabytes. In terms of processor, I'm using a 1.1 gigahertz Intel Celeron. For Unity, they recommended 2.0 gigahertz processor or faster. And for Unreal, they recommend now a quad-core Intel 2.5 gigahertz or faster. In terms of graphic cards, I'm using a DirectX 10. For Unity, they recommend a DirectX 10 with shader model capabilities, and for Unreal, it's DirectX 11 or DirectX 12 or a compatible graphic card. Now, if you would see here, the problem would lie in the RAM, in the memory, or in the processor. So, coming from a developing country, we have to be resourceful. The thing is, if we cannot provide the needed education to our students in order for them to learn or develop AR/VR, then of course, in a developing country, then we would lose the race in the AR/VR industry. So for our story, this is where it began, right? So during the lockdown, it all started in March 2020. The government imposed a nationwide lockdown, and work from home arrangements were enforced. Classes were suspended for around 1 month, and that is only for private schools. Okay, private schools were suspended for 1 month. For Public schools, however, there we only resume classes. Public schools resume classes on October. So that's about, so if that was March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. So that's about 7 months of class suspensions. And of course, we had to deliver some of our computers which were the students were using in our class before in face-to-face classes. We had to deliver some of these computers to the residences of our faculty members so that they will be able to teach online, or they can be prepared to teach online. So, just to give you a brief background, we have over 800 students in our multimedia program. And these were how we were planning to divide this 40 Oculus Rifts and PC equipment to our 800 students prior to the lockdown. So we have 4 time slots per day. So that's 8:20 to 8 a.m. Sorry, this should be 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. 40 students will be using our Oculus Rifts and computers. 11:20 to 2:20 p.m. 40 students. 2:40 p.m. Sorry, that's 2:40 p.m. to 5:40 p.m. That's 40 students, and 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. That's 40 students. So for each time slot, there would be 3 hours of teaching and using the Oculus Rift for 40 students. So per day, that would be 160 students per day, and times 5 days, meaning Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, that would be times 5 days, that would be 800 students. But the lockdown happened and we can't do anything, right? So how are we going to teach AR VR development to our students in a remote setup when they own a low-powered computer? And just to make the problem worse, some of them don't even own a computer. What do they have? They only have a smartphone. Alright? They don't have computers coming from a developing country. They only own a smartphone because when the lockdown happened, our students now travel to their own provinces and rural areas. So here are the strategies our schools are using. Is we use now cloud-based apps. Alright, so cloud-based apps, our first option was A-Frame. The good thing about A-Frame is it's a simple, with just the use of Notepad or any text editor, you could now create web AR/VR apps using a simple HTML, CSS, and JavaScript coding using a simple text editor. We also use Unite AR. For Unite AR, we can develop now mobile AR VR applications. And of course, one of my personal favorites is Amazon Sumerian, which is also free for 1 year for a certain amount of file size. A good thing about Amazon Sumerian, which is my personal favorite, is its interface is similar to Unity, and the same thing, it's coding. While there's no coding, it's simply drag and drop. It's similar to the blueprint of Unreal Engine. And one of our options, of course, is Play Canvas. A good thing about Play Canvas is its interface is similar to Unity, and the coding now here is HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Right? Now, of course, when we're using cloud-based apps, there are some advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages would be it's cheaper for the students because they don't have to pay any lab fees, and some of these cloud-based apps are free. In terms of business side, of course, our institution will spend less for utility bills such as electricity and internet. Of course, using these cloud-based apps, there are also some disadvantages. Disadvantages is while some of these softwares are free, there's a pricing for additional features. If you want a certain feature, you have to pay. However, because the students are not using our laboratories, lab fees and utility expenses now can be allocated instead to purchase these features. So our budget for lab fees and utility now can be allocated to these features, and of course, which will still cost lesser than lab and utility expenses. Now, if you still prefer to use our if they still prefer to use Unity or Unreal Engine, which is the major platforms for AR and VR development, we use now a remote desktop setup. So what is a remote desktop setup? So with a remote desktop setup, students can access our school's computer while working or studying from home using their own low-powered computers. So good thing about remote desktop computers is, or a good thing about a remote desktop setup is, even with uh, even with a smartphone, students can access our school's computer while they're staying at home, right? So they don't have to worry about CPU rendering or processing, because the CPU rendering or processing happens on the school's CPU, or in our company buildings CPU, and not on their local computers. So processing is fast because CPU rendering or processing happens in the school's CPU and not on their local computers. What were our options for a remote desktop setup? So far these are the remote desktop setup solutions that we tested successfully. So we used the Chrome Remote Desktop by Google, which is free. So it's also free for Google, Mac, and even for smartphones. And of course, we use now a remote Windows. We also use the remote desktop setup provided by Windows, which is also free. Now, a good thing about the Windows Remote Desktop, Mac OS users can also access this, can use also this remote, can also use this Windows Remote Desktop for free by downloading the Microsoft Remote Desktop application for Mac. All right? So, with those two options, the question would be, should I use a cloud-based software or remote desktop setup for developing an AR VR application? Well, of course, the answer there would be it depends. So what we usually do now is we ask our students, or developers now can submit or propose now a game design document or an AR VR app design document. So this one is just a simple template, or a a typewritten template in which our students or developers now discuss now how the mechanics of the game, what else, the gameplay of their game, the characters and so on. And from there, based on this game design document or AR VR app design document, which will now list down the game mechanics, the gameplay, if ever, the environment that they will be needing, the assets that they will be needing, we will now see what features of their design document will the app be needing. And from there, after brainstorming now the features that the app will be needing, we now create a low fidelity prototype. So what is a low fidelity prototype? So a low fidelity prototype is a simple black and white printed simple paper that is printed in black and white bond paper. So if you would see here, this is a prototype of a low fidelity prototype of a website created by one of our students. So it's a simple, before we do the actual coding, it's a simple, what do you call this? It's simple layout printed on black and white layout printed on a black and white bond paper, and um, we will see now how the target users will be able to interact with the platform. And there you would see now how the website is gonna work. So that's what a low fidelity prototype looks like. And after now presenting a low fidelity prototype, we now ask them to submit a high fidelity prototype. So what is a high fidelity prototype? In here, a high fidelity prototype, you will see here, it's now a digital version of the app. But there's no coding yet. It will just show you how the app looks like in colored version, and how it looks like, for example, if there's a drop down menu or if a scroll down menu. And from there, our users now, target users now, can see how the app looks like. And from there, you would see now, okay, so this is simple carousel, and you would see now, developers now can see what our users, or the developers can see what the app looks like. Alright, so before the actual development. So there you go. Now, so here, using a game design document and a prototype, so before the actual development, design documents and prototypes help us identify the features that we need to use, so students and developers can choose an AR/VR development platform to use. So for example, if we're using this type of feature, then we recommend to use this cloud-based software. For example, if there's not much features, then we ask them to use a simple cloud-based software. If it's a complex feature that they need to use in their app based on the prototype they submitted, then we ask them now to use a remote desktop setup. Alright, so that's it, and thank you for listening. Alright, and see you. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask questions, or I recorded this video prior to the seminar, so if there are some technical difficulties and I cannot answer you live, you can contact me here on LinkedIn or on Twitter if you have so many questions. And thank you for listening.